What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about El Salvador. El Salvador recently made Bitcoin legal tender, and it is an incredibly bullish thing that I think a lot of people have overlooked. Right now, we're pretty much seeing the market stay relatively flat since we've had this news, when in reality, I think that this is going to lead to a drastic shift in how Bitcoin's used. It's going to be a very interesting topic. If you don't know all the details about it, I'm going to fill you in now, and I'm going to let you know why I think this is one of the most bullish things that has happened in Bitcoin, and we haven't seen it get priced in yet. So I think there's a lot of appreciation to come for Bitcoin on the heels of this news. It's just not hit yet. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and let's start talking about this. The first thing that we want to do is we want to look at a couple of tweets from the president of El Salvador. I want you to know his thoughts, and then I'm going to show you a few other things and give you my thoughts, because I really think that only a select few people are really grasping the ramifications of this decision. So let's take a look here at, we will switch to this. We're going to take a look at this in a minute, but the first thing we're going to look at are these tweets that were posted last month by the president of El Salvador. He says Bitcoin has a market cap of $680 billion. If 1% of it is invested in El Salvador, that would increase our GDP by 25%. On the other side, Bitcoin will have 10 million potential new users and the fastest growing way to transfer $6 billion a year in remittances. Next, he says, a big chunk of those $6 billion is lost to intermediaries. By using Bitcoin, the amount received by more than 1 million low-income families will increase in the equivalent of billions of dollars per year. So now the first thing to understand of this is, what is remittances? Remittances is essentially when low-income families may have a certain person or family members living overseas. And when they're sending dollars back to El Salvador, they have to pay a hefty fine, or not even a fine, I would just say a fee on that transaction. So let's say they're sending back $1,000 in USD. There's a good chance that they're going to pay up to 20 to 30% in remittance fees. That means $200 to $300 is going to disappear. And these are low-income families. That's a ton of money to be A, sending back home, and then B, just giving it away in remittances when another option exists that would take a fraction of that for the transaction cost. So that's number one. That's very important for a lot of people. Next, we're going to look at this one. It says, furthermore, 70% of El Salvador's population doesn't have a bank account and works in the informal economy. Doesn't have a bank account and work in the informal economy. Financial inclusion is not only a moral imperative, but also a way to grow the country's economy, providing access to credit, savings, investment, and secure transactions. This is probably the most important point. 70% of El Salvador's population doesn't have a bank account. Think about what that means, okay? Imagine if you are living in a place where you don't have access to a bank account to make your payments. That means every time you have to pay your water bill or your electricity bill or taxes, you have to physically go to the place that the building is. Like, you have to go to that institution or whatever it might be and make the payment. Now, for a lot of people that are living in areas where they don't have access to a car, they have to take public transportation, they may live a few hours away from wherever they have to go to make their payment, that's a big headache. That is a very difficult way every month that you have to go make your payments. It's incredibly a burden to everybody. Now, on top of that, think about what this means if you're trying to run or start a business. Let's say you have a business of taxis, right? You don't have Uber and stuff, that you can use like you can use it here, but you have a taxi business. You have 10 taxis, and you are basically forced to collect all of your payments from your riders in cash. You are then forced to pay all your drivers in cash, and you are now forced to hold a lot of cash, which can be stolen, it can burn in a fire, whatever. And you might have a long trip to your bank if you wanted to go deposit the money, if you have a bank account. Well, this creates a plethora of problems, because now if you want to grow your business, you're going to have a heck of a time just collecting the money, make sure nobody's stealing anything, and then paying everybody. And who's going to manage all that money? How do you know that you're not going to have some type of routine to pick up the money and someone's going to pick up on that and rob you? So there are a lot of things that you can't do, which you could just do with Bitcoin. Because now with Bitcoin, if you're running that exact same business and you just have a Bitcoin wallet and you tell your riders you accept Bitcoin, someone could take a ride in a taxi. As soon as they're done with that ride, they can send the payment via Bitcoin, right? That is a much easier way to do it. The driver shows a QR code for the business. The rider deposits the money and it goes right into the Bitcoin account, paid, done. And then at the end of the day or at the end of the week, when the employer is paying all the drivers, they just have to see what their pay rate is or whatnot and send money to their Bitcoin wallets. Very, very simple. You suddenly have solved your problem of scaling. You can scale now to 100 taxis if you want it, because you no longer have a problem of how you're going to manage all of the money. This is big. When you don't have access to financial services, you cannot do things that we in other countries that have financial services take for granted. Now, this also would give them access to credit, savings, and investment and secure transactions. I mean, a couple of those are in. Savings, investment, secure transactions, that's all part of Bitcoin. But access to credit is an interesting one because, you're not necessarily having that just yet. But you likely will. Services will be provided at a certain point where they, based on their amount of Bitcoin in their wallet that they have, divulged or whatnot, they can probably get a certain amount of credit that they can access, right? The same way that you use your financial assets today to get a credit score based on, whether you've paid your bills, whether you have assets, whether, you have income, you'll be able to do the same thing against Bitcoin and have credit in a system where it doesn't currently exist. This is very, very important because think about how much their economy could grow over the next 5 years now that everyone has access to a financial system. It's that simple. You're in a country that doesn't have access to a financial system and now you suddenly do. That's pretty big. And we're going to get back to this topic in a minute. We're going to finish up with this last tweet. He says, "We hope that this decision will be just the beginning in providing a space where some of the leading innovators can reimagine the future of finance, potentially helping billions of people around the world." I think that's absolutely true. Now, El Salvador has had its own issues too, which we're going to go over. And those issues actually make this such a good decision because now a lot of the people that have their money in Bitcoin are protected against corruption and, anything that could really happen there that puts a threat to them that they didn't have financial security for. So now we're going to go over to another thing I want you to see here. This is called the 2021 Index of Economic Freedom. This gives you information on most countries and it gives them a ranking based on their economic freedom, and it tells you some information about them. So first thing, we see here that under rule of law, the property rights are at 39.9. Now, what you want to keep in mind is these are all out of 100, okay? So 39.9 is pretty low. I mean, if we compare the rule of law from El Salvador to the United States, property rights are at 79.7%, judicial effectiveness is 72, government integrity is 76 for the United States. We go back to El Salvador. These are all in the 30s. Property rights are 39.9, judicial effectiveness 33.5, government integrity is 34.2. So not a lot of good sentiment on property rights, the effectiveness of the judicial system, or the integrity of the government, which means that if you're worried about those things, you are definitely worried about any assets you own and protecting them. Then you also have regulatory efficiency. You have the business freedom is at 52, labor freedom is at 52, monetary freedom is actually quite high at 81. We compared those numbers here in the United States. Business freedom is 82, labor freedom 87, monetary freedom 81. So going back here once again, 52 and 52 for business and labor freedom. So business and labor freedom are far lower. The government size, you see the tax burden is 77, government spending is 81, fiscal health is 79. So that's 77, 81, 89. Compared to the US, 76 for tax burden, government spending is 62, and then 34. So actually, government spending we see that it's quite higher in El Salvador. The tax burden is roughly the same. The fiscal health in El Salvador is actually much higher than in the United States, which is odd. It must be population density wise because they both use the US dollar. So it's a little strange that the fiscal health is, actually higher than what we're seeing in the United States by a large amount. That's kind of interesting. Open markets in the United States, trade freedom is at 80, investment freedom 85, financial freedom 80. Here we see 70 for trade, 70 for investment, 60 for financial. So basically the reason I'm showing you this is you can see that El Salvador is ranked number 94 in the world. The United States is ranked number 20. There's a big gap between those two. And El Salvador, to be honest, number 94 is not a bad score, which means that there's a lot of other countries that would benefit even more from Bitcoin than El Salvador will. But El Salvador will benefit tremendously. Now, if you also think about the fact that they have these issues, there's a lot of issues with corruption. You know, you see here we have, I think I closed that article by accident, but I had another article that basically talked about the corruption in El Salvador. And maybe that was down here. Yeah, actually it's down here in rule of law. It says, although private property, both non-real estate and real estate is recognized and protected by law in El Salvador, enforcement efforts to protect property rights are uneven, which means you have property assets, you can't guarantee on the government's ability to protect your property assets, meaning that it won't get stolen from you. And then mortgages and property liens exist. The judicial system is slow and costly. That's never good. Corruption scandals are common at the federal, legislative, and judicial levels and at the municipal level. 3 of the past 4 presidents have been indicted for corruption. Now, keep that in mind. If the rule of law is littered with corruption, well, one of the things that you as a citizen are going to have the biggest problem with is maintaining your wealth, because you're always going to be worried that someone corrupt is going to figure out a way to steal your wealth from you. And I'm sure that happens in many ways. Well, one of the things that's going to be interesting now with Bitcoin is people that are starting to convert their assets into Bitcoin or their monetary wealth into Bitcoin there. It's going to be out of the purview, meaning that they're going to have their Bitcoin, they can store it securely, and nobody can really come and steal that from them unless they come and get their private keys or threaten them or something like that. That's a possibility. But it's a lot better than having your money in a bank and it can just be seized. You know what I mean? Like, there's a huge difference in the level of safety that a person will feel living in that environment versus living in an environment where they can have Bitcoin. A lot of countries that have the bigger populations and economies don't think about these things, you know, because you have access to all of it. You have access to the financial system. You have credit. You have bank accounts. It's not difficult for you. You want to open a bank account? You can do it the next day, you can do it online, and you can do an electronic transfer to move your money. If you have access to all that, it doesn't seem like these are big deals. These are huge deals. These are incredibly huge deals because there are billions of people with these problems. Now we move into looking at the actual country rankings. Okay, so we see that number 94 is El Salvador. So it's up here listed as in a category of moderately free. Okay, this is El Salvador here. Now you have mostly unfree. So these are lower ranked countries that could likely all benefit from having Bitcoin. It would give them the ability to do the things I just mentioned to you, boost their small businesses, boost their economies in general, allow their people to have higher property rights. There are a ton of them here. And look at one of them. It's number 107, China, who just recently banned Bitcoin. Well, they don't want their people to be free, so they're going to keep going into the lower category. Eventually, they'll reach repressed because that's what they're doing to their people. So China is a big problem, and I'm glad that they're out of the Bitcoin space. I feel bad for the Chinese citizens, though, that do not agree with this and want their freedom. So that I feel bad about, but I mean, I'm glad that the country in general and the government is out of this space because they, quite frankly, don't deserve to be in it for what they do to their people. What deserves to happen is that the people start moving out of there and adopting other financial options like Bitcoin, or even moving to a country where they have access to a financial system that is not completely corrupt. So we go down this list, we see that there are up to 160. So ranked 160 is in the mostly unfree. There are a ton of countries here. Out of this, if even 5% started it making Bitcoin legal tender, that would be huge for the asset class. So there are plenty of countries in much worse shape than El Salvador that could benefit from Bitcoin, okay? So you've seen this list. And then you have the repressed list. There's another bunch of them here that are completely in the repressed section. You have North Korea on that list. You have Zimbabwe, Bolivia, Algeria, Liberia, Iran, Turkmenistan. Like, there's so many places that would benefit from having a strong financial system that Bitcoin can provide. Then you move down and you have a bunch that aren't even ranked. Now, the reason I'm showing you this and the reason I want you to really focus on this is because you have to try to picture where do you see this going. Well, where I see it going is I see people starting to get used to Bitcoin in El Salvador. Right now, it's probably slowed down slightly, and that may be because people are afraid to put more cash into Bitcoin because the price is down. Just like us, everyone is going to be scared when the price dips. But the fact of the matter is that the people there that are continuing to do it and put their assets into Bitcoin, they're buying low. They're getting in low. If they're receiving payment from, let's say they have a fruit stand or something, and they're making a certain amount of money every day, if that's all going into Bitcoin and they're keeping it there, well, when Bitcoin goes back up to 65, 70,000, they're going to double their money. You know, that's an increased immense return based on what they could get if they just held dollars. So I think you're going to see, as Bitcoin goes higher towards the end of the year, a lot of people from El Salvador will now have a lot more purchasing power. And what they will be able to do is they will be able to use that purchasing power to grow their businesses, to have more financial security, to provide better lives for their families. As a result, it's going to, over time, it might take a year or two for you to really start seeing the ramifications of this decision. But over time, you're going to see that more people are going to use that purchasing power to build small businesses and build their communities. And you're pretty much going to see the economic growth in El Salvador start taking a spike. As that happens, all these other countries on these lists that need Bitcoin, that don't see the value in it right now, are going to see the value in it. Once that happens, I think right now it's a walk to get into Bitcoin. What I mean by that is, if countries want to get into Bitcoin, or if institutions want to get into Bitcoin, they're not running towards it. They're walking. They're going slow. They're being very cautious. Well, I think in the next year, it's going to move to a sprint. I think that people are going to start to realize that inflation's not going away, that countries that adopt Bitcoin, with El Salvador being a key testing bed, they're going to see that these countries now are not beholden to the US dollar as a global reserve currency. They're also going to see that they can start building their businesses on a financial infrastructure with minimal investment, right? They don't have to build a whole financial system now that's completely functional like in the United States or Europe, but rather adopt Bitcoin, make it legal tender, give their people the access they need to use this and to pay their taxes in it and to receive it as their payment for work, as their paycheck, basically. Now, this I think is going to be huge. I think that there is a solution sitting there waiting for all these countries, but the countries are walking towards it. They're talking about it. They're having the discussions. They're seeing what's happening around the world. They're scared of what happened in China. They're scared of how the IMF and central banks reacted to El Salvador doing this, right? But when something like this exists and it can change the fundamental life of the people in these countries, give them access to services that some of the major superpowers in the world already have access to, give it to them securely, and give it to them in a way that the asset can appreciate and they know for sure it cannot depreciate, or I'm sorry, it can depreciate, but it cannot deflate, right? Or God, I'm an idiot. Can't even talk. It cannot inflate. You can't inflate Bitcoin. Nobody's going to create more supply, right? 21 million. That's it. And it can be divided into 100 million parts per Bitcoin, Satoshis. As we start seeing people find the value in this, I think what you're going to see is a huge, huge rise in people running towards Bitcoin, in countries running towards Bitcoin, in countries creating treasuries for Bitcoin. It may not all happen within the next year. It might take 5 years, but the next couple of years, you're going to start seeing that happening. You know, more countries will start doing the same thing. As those countries start doing the same thing, the price will slowly appreciate. When more countries get into it, other countries will say, we need to get into this too. We're going to be left behind. That's how the race begins. Now, the final thing with El Salvador that's super interesting too is, what do you think a country does when they adopt a new currency as a legal tender? Well, it would be wise for that government to start accumulating it, to create a reserve, right? We have the Federal Reserve in the United States, and what they did was basically steal everyone's gold when they got off the gold standard And what happened? The gold kept growing in value. The currency that they traded it for kept going down. That's basically what happened, you know? But the point of that is that when gold backed all the currency, they accumulated it. They still do. What is El Salvador going to have to do now if they've made Bitcoin a legal tender? Well, they're going to want to accumulate Bitcoin. And what are some ways they can do that very easily? Well, number one, if they're accepting tax payments in Bitcoin, they just hold it, right? They just hold all their tax payments and they're accumulating Bitcoin, and those tax payments are going to be appreciating over the years. On top of that, they have a lot of geothermal energy sources that are completely untapped, unused. This is free energy that is sitting there doing nothing. Now, what does that mean? That's actually a loss, right? They're losing money because they're not turning that into revenue. They're not turning that like physical energy into monetary energy, you know? They're going to start turning it into monetary energy. They're going to likely have a government-backed mining operation. Those mining operations, maybe some will be privately owned, who knows, will pop up in areas where there's abundant geothermal energy. That geothermal energy will be some of the cheapest renewable energy on the planet. It'll make their mining efforts a lot more profitable. What a great way to create jobs, use a previously untapped resource to generate revenue, and then put that revenue in an asset that is deflationary, that has a set supply, and that is continuing to grow globally with adoption. They're literally going to convert their energy into monetary energy, and they are going to be able to do it while accumulating the most valuable asset on Earth. I think that this is going to be way bigger towards the importance of where Bitcoin goes than anybody realizes right now. You know, I think this is a spark that's going to start a massive fire, and that fire is going to make people run towards Bitcoin. I don't know when it's going to happen, but the lower the price stays, the happier I am. I don't mind accumulating at these prices. They're pretty great. So I think that it's just something to keep in mind and be ready for. Don't be shocked when you see more countries jumping on board and doing this in the next year or 2 years. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Thank you for joining me. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and check out the videos this weekend. We're going to be doing an eGold video in a day or two, so that'll be cool. If you're interested in TA and stuff, make sure you follow the channel, subscribe to it, and check out a lot of my other videos. I give you as much TA as I can, and follow me on Twitter if you want updates, you know, sometimes daily, on things that are going on in the crypto space. Link is in the description. Like, subscribe, catch you next time. Peace out.